All right. Um, Welcome to statistics, and hope everyone's doing all right. I'm gonna go ahead and let the stream go for a little bit, and wait for a few more people to get in. Make sure everyone's able to connect properly, and then we'll get started. I hope everyone's doing all right this morning. Um, I see that we already have a handful of you in online. That's good. So the idea here is that we'll I'll start going at 9:30. Um, but first day, not everyone's quite here yet. So I wanted to make sure everyone gets in before we get started for real. But yeah, this is statistics. No, at least one of you thought the class was at 9 o'clock and not 9:30. So hopefully that's straightened out. It is at 9:30, and we'll be here every day, or not every day. We'll be here Tuesday and Thursday from 9:30 to 10:45, 10:50. So how are you doing, Fawcett? Looks like I have 9 people here right now, so give it a little more time. But if you are here, I do have to take attendance for this class. If you want to go ahead and put your name in the chat, make sure I count you here, that'll be good. The attendance is not for a grade, it's just something I got to keep track of. Morning, Ashland. Nice, looks like we're up to 11, that's good. Okay, well, it's 9:37. I think we should go ahead and get started. Um, like I said, I hope everyone's doing well today and is navigating their classes this semester fine so far. Um, I got some messages that some people had already, like from this section of the class, had already watched the lecture, which was actually yesterday's lecture. Uh, you know, it the lectures are going to be pretty much the same. It's just the only thing that might be different is the questions that people ask in one lecture versus the other, and how they're responded to. But you can actually watch either one. What I'll do is after the stream is done on Twitch, then I'll export it to YouTube, and then I'll create a playlist there for each individual class. That may make it a little bit easier for some of you if you just want to follow what our class does, but honestly, you could watch either of the streams for my stats sections, and you'll be fine. But if you do watch the other stream, or you watch a recording of this stream, let me know so I can count you present for having watched the stream. So. Alright, so this is statistics. Hopefully none of you are in my calculus class that starts in an hour and a half, so we may see them towards the end of this period. Anyway, but yeah, we'll be doing this every Tuesday, Thursday for basically the entire semester, I guess. So I'm Joseph Severino. I've been working at Midland College since 2002, and actually statistics was the first class, one of the first classes I taught, but literally the first lecture I taught. So and it's something I've taught pretty consistently throughout the time that I've been at Midland College. Last 5 or 6 years, I usually teach 2 or 3 classes per semester in statistics specifically. I'm also teaching college algebra and calculus 2 right now, and business math support course. So I have a variety of courses, but right now 3 of my 6 courses I'm teaching are statistics, and yeah, so I do feel pretty comfortable with the material, and I hope to convey all of that to all of you. Now, I've gotten a lot of questions so far about accessing the ebook. I have the hard copy textbook right here, but the ebook, I just this morning got that set up with my math lab, or my lab, or whatever they call it now. So I'll be posting that code in an announcement on Canvas. That way you can enroll in that and then be able to access your ebook. You will need your access code that you got with the book. Now, if you have a physical copy of the book, that's fine. You can do either way. If you want a physical copy, that's great. But if you actually bought the access code from the bookstore, or you bought it from Pearson or whatever, you will have to enter that code in once you have the correct course ID. That like I said, I'll provide that for you, so you'll be able to connect to that. So anyway, so that's something I will do later today. I have another lecture at 11, so probably later this afternoon at 1 o'clock I'll be posting the course ID into Canvas. That way you can access that. So. Alright. So let's see where we're at. Okay. Alright. So now we're looking at the files in the Canvas course right now. So these 3 files that I've uploaded so far are all part of the syllabus. We'll start with the addendum. So, for this class, this is our IVC class. It's our interactive virtual class, I guess is what that stands for. Um, so, what that means is that certainly feel free. If you have questions, type them into the chat, and I'll be asking questions of y'all during the lecture that I'm hoping for y'all to respond in the chat. That's also how I'm keeping track of it. Attendance, like I said earlier, so or participation. Either way, it's all one thing. But make sure you put your name in there, especially if your username doesn't really match your own name that I have on the roster. Um, anyway, um, you have my contact info there. The phone number here, I'm actually not in my office. I am at home. But you can still call that number. It'll leave me a voicemail if you want to leave a voicemail message. And I'll be able to access that through my email. So, that's one way to contact me, or else you have my email address, or you can just send a message through Canvas. Any of those will work. Canvas I actually have connected to notify me on my phone, so that might be the best way if you had to choose. So there are a few different options. For office hours, these are all listed by day, so several sets of office hours each day. Well, at least an hour and a half each day. So during those time periods, if you want to contact me on Canvas, or if you want to send me if you have like a specific question on homework or something, or we're reviewing for a test, that'd be a good time to send it, and I can respond immediately. During these time periods, if you do have kind of a more elaborate question, then I can perhaps in some cases make a video, showing a little more detailed response as far as how this problem might be worked, and then how we can proceed from there. So, and at the beginning of class, we'll also have an opportunity to go over any questions that you may have from the previous lecture, especially from the homework. I can start off by working a few of those if we need to. So there's different things that we can do. We have a lot of possibilities here. So we'll have 4 exams during the semester. Most of the exams will cover 2 chapters, in some case 3 chapters. We actually cover parts of 11 different chapters in our textbook. And this sounds like a lot, but we don't do every single section, so that won't be as bad as it sounds. Our first test is over chapters 1, 2, and 3, which covers like terminology and what we call descriptive statistics. We'll talk about more of the details here later. So that won't be for a little while yet. You might have noticed I didn't provide a calendar yet, so that is something I'm still working on, and I'll make sure by the end of the week that we'll have that. So I'll make sure I get that posted when it's done, and that'll be in the file section. That tends to be where I put most things, either that or announcements. We also will have a cumulative final exam. Now, the final exam will have to be proctored. The other ones, not necessarily. It probably won't do it for the other ones. But for the final exam, yes. Now, proctoring, what that entails is that, one, we could potentially have you take it in person if you like. Depending on how things are in December. We hope they're better than they are now. Yeah, we'll have some different proctoring times set up with in coordination with the math lab, and you'll be able to sign up for a time that you can take your final exam there. Now we could also The alternative to taking a paper test would be to take, you can take it on, if you have a webcam, you can do it through a Zoom meeting or something like that. Even though right now they seem to be having a little trouble, or Microsoft Teams or something like that, and then you would be able to that way we can verify that it's that you are you when you're taking the exam, and you have to have like an ID card or whatever, a driver's license would work, just to verify your identity and make sure that you're the person enrolled in the class, and then we can proctor you from there virtually, if not in person. So there will be different options. We'll be talking about this more maybe in November. We'll probably start really focusing on knowing when you need to take the exam and things like that. You'll probably have a window of like 4 or 5 days where it could be taken. Excuse me, 4 or 5 or 6 days. Anyhow, so we'll talk about that more once we get closer to that end of the semester. We're just starting today, so there's no need to worry about it too much just yet. Chapter exams will count 70% of our grade, and then the final exam will be 20%. Now, beyond the exams, we also will have a project that we work on this semester. This will be worth the other 10% of your grade, basically. Now, the project will be broken up into, I think it's 4 parts, it may be 5, but we'll see what we end up doing. Probably 4 parts, but after each exam, we'll have like another part of the project, and that part of the project will basically cover the same material that was on the exam, so it kind of ties in together nicely. And so the idea is that we're going to start with a data set, and with that data set, we'll basically apply all the stuff that we've learned in our that particular set of material to this project, to this data set, and then answer questions based on that. So it might sound a little scary right now. It's actually not that bad, and I'll be available to help you all with that. You're not just on your own with it. So now, I will assign homework, but homework is just for practice. It's not something I'm going to be taking up at all. So I do hope that you keep up with it, but by no means is it a requirement for you to turn in or anything like that. Just try to keep up with it on your own, and make sure you're understanding the material as we go through it. That's the main thing. But I definitely recommend that you work through the homework between classes. That way, if you do have a question on a particular topic, we can address it either at the beginning of the next lecture, or you can just send me a question through Canvas in between, and I can address that either by, like I said, a short response pointing in the right direction, or going ahead and making a short video demonstrating how that problem is worked out and explaining why we need to do what we do there. So for attendance, we already talked about this, but make sure you just put your name in chat, that I recognize that you're here watching live, and that I can just count you present. It doesn't count any part of your grade. It's just something I need to keep track of. So please make sure you do that. I said here in the syllabus, if you watch a recording of the lecture, I'll include some short problem or statement. Don't even worry about the short problem or statement. If you watch a recording of the lecture instead of the live lecture, just send me an email so I can mark you present. And make sure you tell me which class you're in, because I do have 6 different classes that I have to keep track of. So although it's with stats, it's kind of like 50-50. It's always the first place I look, I think. So Now, as far as calculators go, we will need. Oh, sorry. We will need a specific calculator for this course. Now, there's two that we recommend because they have the functions that we need. First of all, we have the TI-36X calculator. And if you see here, it has a data button where we can go in and enter different statistical values and then use the calculator to calculate some of our different statistics that we need. And it actually is a massive time saver when we have that available. And we can then do our stat applications, whether it's just the basic descriptive statistics or actual calculations based on that. So and we'll talk about how to use these throughout the semester. I'll actually have cheat sheets for these that I'll post on Canvas, and whenever you have a test, I'll make sure I include the calculator instructions as part of the materials provided there. The other calculator we recommend, and this one's it's either a TI-83 or TI-84. Both of those work fine. The only downside is these are graphing calculators, and they do cost a lot more than the more simple TI-36X. But just like the other one, we see that we have a stat button. And then we have our data list and everything like that. So anyway, still a little dusty. Haven't used them too much. So definitely recommend either of those. If you have one already, that's great. If you need to buy one, I would say get the 36X because it's going to be cheaper by quite a bit compared to the graphing calculator. Anyway, I know I already put the links here, but I mean, already you know this one because they're here. But then the YouTube link, what I'm going to do is I'll take each of the recordings that we end up making on Twitch, and now Twitch will keep them for 60 days, which is nice. But I'll then export them over to YouTube, where it'd be a more kind of a more permanent storage or repository, whatever you want to call it. That way, that if we do a review for the first test in a couple of weeks, they'll be gone by the end of the semester when it's time to take the final. So that's one of the reasons I want to make sure I copy everything over to YouTube. That way it'll still be available by the time you take the final, in case you want to go back and look at the review again for each of the different tests that we took. So, all right. Now this next is kind of what our general syllabus is for statistics. I went ahead and entered all my information here, but the rest of it you just need to read through on your own. Then it mentions the text. So, and then attendance policy, withdrawal policy, things like that, and covers what material we're using. So make sure you read through that. The other thing is our COVID statement, which honestly it probably doesn't apply to us, but Midland College required that we include it. Basically says that it depending on guidelines from the Texas Department of Health or from the national level, if things change, we could go from classroom based to online based. Since we're already online, it doesn't really affect us, but that's certainly relevant if you have any classes that meet in class. So, okay, um, and that's all we have there on the. As far as the Pearson goes, here's our access number. Severino 59097, and that's for statistics. So if you want to go ahead and write that down, but I'm going to post that in a Canvas announcement later, just to make sure everyone has that. But that's the course ID that you'll need to use to enroll in the MyMathLab course. I'm not using MyMathLab for anything, but that's so you can access your ebook, because I don't know if you can access it beyond that. And a lot of my algebra students were saying the same thing, so I set up sections for both classes there. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Is everyone able to view the stream okay? Is anyone having problems? Your test will actually be done, like the chapter exams will be done in Canvas, and I'll set them up as a quiz in Canvas, and that'll be your test. Okay. One thing that you may notice is that there is a little bit of delay in the video. So when y'all type something in the chat, it may take 5 to 10 seconds to get to me. So just bear with me if you've asked a question and I'm not immediately addressing it. That's because of the technical limitations of the platform. But just be patient, basically. How are y'all connecting to this? Are a lot of you using laptop or phone? Yeah, the now I noticed it was 6th edition, and I only have the 5th edition. So I'm not sure, honestly. Um, I thought it was 5th edition. I don't think we got a new book, but it did say 6th on the syllabus, but it said 5th when I linked the class on Pearson. So honestly, I'm not sure. But yeah, this one's 5th edition. And so some of you are using laptop, some of you are using phone, one desktop. That's good. How is it on phone? Is it working pretty well? Yeah, I think it's 5th edition, Haley. I think that's a typo in the syllabus, but it wouldn't make a big deal. It shouldn't affect anything. Cool. That's good to hear. Um, Phone screens are tend to be big enough nowadays that it's not as difficult to use as maybe in years past. So that's great. All right. So for today, and we have quite a bit of time left still. I'm going to go ahead and start in on chapter 1. Now, we'll probably cover the majority of chapter 1 between today's and Thursday's class. And what chapter 1 is basically all terminology. There we go. And I'll try very hard to stay on the screen here as far as what I'm writing. So we're going to begin with section 1.1, which is an introduction to statistics. Hopefully everyone can read that okay. Ideally I'll be writing in pencil, but I think the pen shows up a lot better on the screen, so Sure. Alright, so we'll begin just by defining statistics itself. That's the name of the course after all. So it's probably a good way to begin. A lot of you may not have a great idea of what statistics is versus when you walk into an algebra classroom like college algebra, and you probably had a pretty reasonable idea of what to expect. You'll be solving equations, you'll be working with variables and graphing things and all kinds of things like that. As a course, statistics is actually very different from like an algebra course, in that the math that we do in statistics is actually relatively simple. A lot of what we do really is just taking numbers that we get from problems and plugging them into formulas and getting an answer. The larger concern of statistics is not just the numbers that we have, but what do they tell us about the data that we're studying. Or the group of people that we're studying. What do these numbers tell us? Or whatever our focus is, we get these numbers, and then we try to either describe the group that we're examining, or we're trying to make inferences about the population that we study. Now, I'm already using some of the terminology, so I don't want to get too much further into that. But we're going to go ahead and define a lot of these different things today. So statistics we'll call the science of collecting, organizing, summarizing, analyzing, and interpreting information. So basically, and this kind of lays out a lot of what we do in order in the book. Our first set of material is on collecting, organizing and summarizing information. That's like the first 3 chapters. And there's a little bit of analysis in there too. Um, then we get more into the inferential side of statistics, where now we're trying to make predictions using statistics. We're trying to make generalizations about the population. Okay, what does this information tell us? And so that's the the concerns as far as what we get in the later part of the textbook. So for now, we'll leave statistics as this. It's just a whole lot of different things, but all towards the same goal. So data, we'll call this actual observations or responses. So data is just each little piece of information that we collect. So we collect data in multiple ways. It could be done multiple ways. We could be doing collecting data by observing. That's what we say, actual observations. Basically, if we're looking at how many drivers use the intersection at Midkiff and Loop 250 every day, well, we can go there and count, and that would be our data. How many drivers came through from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. or 7 a.m. to 8 a.m., etc. Those would be observations. Responses would be maybe if we sent out a survey to someone, or we went out and had people fill out surveys, which I don't know if we can do that right now, but theoretically. Or it could be responses to experiments where we actually set up a formal experiment to some degree and examine what people choose or how they react in different situations. And that would be data as well. So it's just kind of our most basic element that we need. It's just that this is the information that we gather, that we start with, and start to build our observations on. Now, an individual, this is just a single person or object that is being studied. Okay, so notice that it's not always people that we're examining. Sometimes we're examining different objects as well. So when we study people, we certainly want to collect data from people or collect data about people. But we also sometimes are interested in studying objects. If we have a manufacturing company, for instance, that we produce a lot of a certain item, we want to make sure that the manufacturing processes that we use are working properly and are turning out effective, useful items that we can turn around and sell and hopefully not have to replace as soon as we sell them. So what we want to make sure we do is we collect this data from individual items. Like if we take one of our manufactured items off the assembly line every 30 minutes and then make sure it's functioning properly and make sure it's working like it should and that the manufacturing process are still sound, then we'll approve that and we'll keep going. Okay, and that individual object is part of our data. Now, if we find that the manufacturing process is lacking, that we've produced an item that doesn't work, then that also tells the company that we need to immediately stop and address the issue. Is it a person working on the line that's making mistakes, or is it a robot or machine working on the line that has developed a flaw of some kind? But we don't want to send out bad items in that case that will have to be returned or replaced, because that's just an additional cost to the company. So that's the concept of quality control. That the manufacturing process is successful and they're creating good workable items. So we don't always just study people, but also sometimes objects. So that's the concept of an individual. This is just a single person or object that we study. So we broaden that and say that a population now population is the entire group of individuals being studied. So, population can mean different things in different scenarios. Population could be the entire population of students at Midland College, and right now we have 3,500 or so. Okay. Population could mean every student that's currently enrolled in this class. So even though the college as a whole is larger than this class, when we define population, it means it's the particular group that we're interested in studying. So, do we want to study this class in particular, or do we want to study all the students at the college? Depending on our focus, that will change which population we look at. Population could mean the entire population of the United States. It could be the population of Texas. It could be the population of Midland County. When we say population, it doesn't necessarily mean everything. It means everything in the group that we're focusing on. So, if we're just focusing on Midland College students, we don't need to talk to students that are from different colleges or get information from students that are from different colleges. We just want students at this college. That's our population. Now, when we look at the U.S. population, right now we have the U.S. Census still taking place, I believe. But that's been ongoing this year in spite of everything else that's happened. So the census is something that happens every 10 years, and basically the idea is we want to get demographic information from everyone that's currently living in the United States. And so that way we can allocate funds to different states according on the size of the population living there. The members of the House of Representatives are counted by the population in those states. That's why Texas has a lot more representatives in Congress than New Mexico, for instance, which is a lot lower population than Texas. Every state has the same number of senators, but the number of representatives varies based on population. And so there's a lot of different ways that the census affects each individual, but it is a massive undertaking because you think about the population of the United States being 300 million people, probably more than that by now. But it's a massive undertaking. That's why we only do it once every 10 years. So your average scientist working in social sciences, for instance, they're trying to research a particular topic that studies the population of the United States. they probably don't really have time or money even to actually get that information from every single individual in the United States. And so a lot of the time, what we end up doing is we use a sample instead. So that's our next definition. So a sample is a representative subset of the population that is being studied. Now, a sample, it turns out, it really doesn't have to be massive in order to be representative of the population. A lot of the political polls that we see only may have 10,000 people or less that are actually polled. And so they're creating those projections based on a relatively small number of people. But as long as the individuals that we ask to participate in these studies or in these surveys or whatever, as long as they're representative of their population, we actually generally get a pretty good idea of, in the case of a political poll, who those different groups of people are favoring in the election. So we say, okay, 10,000 or less, but what we do then get is a little bit of a margin of error, and we frequently see, if we see an image online where it shows poll results for the state of Texas, for instance, it might say this percentage of people favor this candidate, this percentage of people favor this candidate, and so on. And at the bottom, sometimes you'll see that it says plus or minus 3%. That's our margin of error, and that's something we'll talk about later, much later on. It's like chapter 7 or 8, I believe. But margin of error basically says, okay, we didn't study the whole population. We only studied the sample, but based on our projections, we should be at least this close to the actual answer. And if they've done the poll correctly, then 2 or 3% is actually fairly acceptable. Unfortunately, a lot of our races right now are closer than that, so it doesn't really tell us anything in that sense. But we try to do as best we can with the resources that we have available. And so there's a lot of different sample techniques, and we'll actually talk about those sample techniques in more detail in sections 3 and 4 of chapter 1. So we're not going to do a lot of that now. But when we say representative, that means that if we're looking at a population of people, for instance, we want to make sure that people of all genders are equally represented, people of all races are equally represented, and so on. Financial status, living situation, things like that. And it's actually pretty difficult to guarantee that we've adequately represented each group in this poll, because a lot of the times what they do is kind of a random sample, and so that's one of the pitfalls of sampling techniques. And again, we're going to talk about more when we get to that in sections 3 and 4. Okay, so let's continue with our definitions and terminology. We're doing okay in time. So a statistic is a A measurement that describes a characteristic of the sample. So, we said statistics before as kind of a field of study. Now we're talking about a statistic as being specifically a measurement describing a sample. So, it could be, if we look at the students in this class as a sample of the students at Midland College, we could take all of our ages and average them together, and maybe we'll have the ages of the average student at Midland College. It may not be exactly equal, but we expect to be relatively close with a decent enough class size. Which right now we have 18 people watching, so that may not be enough to assume a certain level of accuracy, but it should be interesting to see the result. Now, you can find the average height. We can find age, the most common eye color. That would be a statistic. There's all kinds of different things that we could potentially study. How do you get to class? Although in this case, a lot of us are just at home. So. That's a better question when we're actually in a classroom. So there's a lot of different things that could be a statistic, but it's basically anything that's based on a sample. Now we take statistics and split that up in two different categories. We have descriptive statistics and these are statistics that describe a sample. And we also have inferential statistics. And these are statistics that make predictions about a population. See if we have any questions on the book out of this one. The answer is maybe. I'm not seeing it. Oh. Now, one other definition that I want to include is parameter. And a parameter is a measurement that describes a characteristic of a population. So notice it's basically the same definition as a statistic, but a statistic is specifically corresponding to a sample, where a parameter specifically corresponds to a population. So if we're trying to decide whether something is a statistic or it's a population or a parameter, we have to determine, is the problem talking about a sample or is the problem talking about a population? So when it talks about a population, we're looking at the entire group of people, whereas a sample may say a selection of people from this population. You know, we're not surveying every single person at the college. We're only getting a random sample of people at the college. So. And we actually have some problems in the book where we try to determine if something is a parameter or if it's a statistic. So I'm going to go ahead and look at a couple of these. Alright, the average score for a class of 28 students taking a midterm exam was 72%. And so we want to determine, does that represent a parameter or a statistic? But really the larger question is that a sample or a population? So if we look at the average score for a class of 28 students taking a midterm exam being 72%, what do y'all think that would be? That one's actually really tricky because it's certainly, we don't have a lot of context there, I would say. Yeah, Luke, you're saying sample? Mm-hmm. So it really depends on the context, and maybe I should have started one that was a sample and not a population. This one we're actually going to say is a population, and that the resulting measurement is a parameter in this case. But the reasoning there is that they told us that we had a class of 20 students, but because we weren't told that it was a portion of a larger group, then we'll assume that this is the entire group, this is the population. I think it's more clear when we look at the, some other groups, some other statements where it's actually a sample and how that sounds before we start looking at the population. So that's maybe not a good problem to start with, but it is a population. So let's look at another question. In a national survey on substance abuse, 9.6% of respondents aged 12 to 17 reported using illicit drugs within the past month. Now, 9.6% of respondents reported using illicit drugs. Now, there's a key word in that tells us whether this is a sample or a population. What do y'all think that's going to be? Sample or population, I'm sorry. So in a national survey, 9.6% of respondents reported using illicit drugs. Sample. Yes. This time we'll call it a sample. The key word that we end up looking at is respondents. So we didn't get information from every single person in the country that is 12 to 17 years old. We only used the data that came from the responses that we got to this survey. Because we only had the responses to the survey, we didn't get information from every single individual. So it has to be considered a sample in that sense. Okay, let's look at one more. Interviews of 100 adults 18 years of age or older, conducted nationwide, found that 44% could state the minimum age required to run for the office of U.S. President. So interviews of 100 adults found 44% could state the minimum age required to be president. We're focusing on adults that are 18 years or older, but we only interviewed 100 people. So what does that tell us then? So of all the adults in the United States, we interviewed 100. Sample, yes. Yeah, we didn't get information from every adult in the United States, just the 100 that we interviewed. 100 may not be a large enough sample size, but it certainly gave us an interesting result. Right, so that'll be a sample, and then the 44% represents a statistic. Do y'all happen to know the minimum age requirement to be president? $35, good. Not actually 70 from the way things look right now, but yeah, 35. Theoretically, I could be president, but I don't want that. I don't want that job. No one sane should want that job. All right, one more. Exactly. Only 12 men have walked on the moon. The average time these men spent on the moon was 43.92 hours. So there's 12 men that have walked on the moon. Is that a sample or the population? Population, yeah. Because that's all 12 men that have walked on the moon. It's not like there's hundreds of people that have been on the moon. It's exactly 12, and this is how long they spent on the surface. Yeah, so we have to ask ourselves when we look at this information that's provided, that are we looking at the entirety of that group, or are we looking at just a portion of that group? and we start to notice that there's key words that they tell us, sometimes it's a little more clear than others. So if we interviewed 100 adults, that's going to be a sample. If we took grade information from every single person in the class without saying that we're talking about a larger population, that's our population. So in problem 8 here, for instance, we said the average score for a class of 28 students taking a calculus midterm exam was 72%. That was our population of the class. We could change that question and say the average score for Mr. Severino's class of 28 students taking a calculus midterm was 72%. And by that would still be a population. How do I make it a sample? Well, we could say one section of calculus, in one section of the calculus or statistics or whatever class, the average score on the midterm was 72%. So if we specify that it's only part of the whole, one section out of however many sections we have, then that would be a sample. But if we're only talking about this one class of students and there's no other context given, it has to be a population. It's a very fine difference that makes it kind of frustrating when you're first looking at this stuff, I understand. Okay. I think we'll go ahead and leave it at that for today. I closed the book, but I do want to go ahead and give you all some problems to work on. So this is on page 11 in section 1.1. And one of the things that I'll do, since I'm picking problems out of the book, is I'll go ahead and take a picture of this page and then upload the homework to Canvas. So that way you'll be able to see it if you don't have a book yet, especially right now at the beginning of the semester. Anyway, so we did a lot of the even ones here, so I'm going to assign the odd ones. Let's look at 7 through 13 odd on this page. And go ahead and practice those. Make sure you understand where the results are coming from. Now, notice that we were talking about population and sample, but the actual question here, is it a parameter or a statistic? So parameter corresponds to population, statistic corresponds to a sample. So by answering one, we've effectively have answered the other. That's why I didn't want to worry about it too much. So, but anyway, so we'll look at those. I hope everyone's been having a good week so far. And that you're getting through these first couple of days of classes okay. I know there were some technology issues yesterday for some classes as far as Zoom or Teams not working perfectly. I've been fortunate that Twitch is still going fine. I don't think too many people are using it for teaching, but it's something I was already familiar with. That's why I chose it, and I feel like it's working all right so far. I hope you all are doing okay with it, and feel like it's going well so far also. But I hope you all have a good rest of the day, and I'll see you again on Thursday. So take care.